Alright, I'm going to try to kind of sum up my life from birth to 20. My birth mother was a teenage runaway, had an abusive household, and she continued to run away the rest of her life. And her life with me, I believe, was till I was about maybe 3-ish. I'm not quite sure. I didn't learn this till much later in life. Until I believe she tried to continue her runaway, and my grandparents got custody of me in a court battle, which I did not know so much later in life. And my father did not know her as far as I could tell or know about, and he was heading to Vietnam. So he came back pretty traumatized from that. Basically, like, closed off. And my stepmom came from kind of a large family as well, like 2 smaller families that were combined, which I did not know about until much later in life. Neither of them really were overly communicative. I think coming from big families, most of their experience was kind of being treated as a group. And parents probably needed to seem like they knew everything, or like they were in charge. And I think, especially for me, the best teachers I've ever had are people that while they're learning, they educate. And I don't think either of my parents had that perspective. Actually, speaking of education, my education was terrible and almost non-existent. There were things like I was reading at an adult level long before the people my age were actually reading. Like, people were sounding out letters while I was reading nursery rhymes, and they were starting to be able to read nursery rhymes when I was reading Dr. Seuss and being bored with it. And by the time they hit Dr. Seuss, I was reading Asimov and Tolkien, and basically looking for answers. Like, adults wouldn't tell me anything, and I thought maybe it's all written down. Maybe that's how people find things out. And then anything else is like you're introduced to a concept, and this continued right up until high school. You're introduced to a concept, and I'm like, oh man, this is great. Tell me more. And they're like, no, I can't tell you more until next week or next month or 2 months from now, because we were following a learning schedule. And I'm like, well, that means everyone's going to be trying to learn what I've just learned over the next month or so, and I have to wait to learn more? It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And I went into a trade school because I figured, actually, I was like really conscious that my education was substandard. And I got exposed to a couple things that were interesting. I kind of like sheet metal. Machine shop was interesting. Real unforgiving math and machine shop. That was pretty much it of the other things I was introduced to. Then I was introduced to electronics, and I was like, this is amazing. It's like magic. These kits, you put together a box, and that box does things. Like my first crystal radio, I was like, this is running off a crystal? And picking up, like music that's like flying through the air, just astounding. But I was not allowed to learn anymore. I was allowed introductory to it, and then now you have to go into auto shop, and those people didn't care if you learned or not. I showed up before with a carburetor. I thought it was a carburetor. It was not a carburetor. And my family, I guess, like, that was the thing too. I was like, did you care that I learned a lot either? Because they didn't then go find me a carburetor. Basically, the school provided like bits of a carburetor and said, just try your best to learn with this. Which is like getting a broken musical instrument, and said, like, well, now we're gonna try to introduce you to musical concepts. So that did no good. And then the other thing about it, it did worse than good in that it only exposed me to topics that directly related to the trade. So like I said, like machine shop math, very specific. And then so I went to another high school because my parents moved. And I did not know what the other kids were doing. And it was still like the whole overwhelming introvert thing of ever-changing faces, loud rooms full of people, forced to interact with people who I did not like or know. Or you get to know somebody, start to like them, and then they vanish. And then you're in some other topic or something like that. And so that was for 2 years trying to like figure out like a new culture and get caught up. And then my school went on strike for an entire year. So no senior year of high school for me. So I was working a full-time job my junior year. I was 17, and my family was just so punish-oriented, and I just couldn't do it anymore. Like going to high school, working full-time, and I was going to Bible study. I was really interested in Christianity, and I was going to Mormon seminary, and I came home late from Bible study, and the pastor even wanted to come with me because like he was so worried at what my punishment might be by being late. But basically like might be physical, or it might be mostly it was just timeouts, like long timeouts that might last, days or weeks or months. And I remember at one point in time I was even like not allowed to go to any more of the Bible studies. So they had a Bible study at my house, and that kind of like broke me free. They're like, well, yeah, like we better send him to Bible study, or we're going to be hosting Bible study on a weekly basis. So I couldn't do it. I came up from Bible study and I got grounded again. I'm like, I just can't do it. I just between school and work and Bible study, to sacrifice the very remaining slice of my free time, I just can't accept that. And basically I moved out at 17. And then like my high school went on strike, which made it much easier for me. Oh, actually one side note about school. Check the time. When I was living on my own, I'd fall asleep in classes, and they'd like, you need a note from your parents or something like that. And I'd write it out. I'd write out a note and hand it into school, and they're like, your parents have to sign this. And I'm like, I don't live with my parents. Which they just did not know how to deal with at first, except for that news went around the school. First with all my teachers. I imagine like they're like, you're gonna have to cut this kid some slack. He's working full time and going to school, and but then strangers that I never met, like adults, came to me and said, congratulations on your emancipation, which is the first I'd ever heard of that word. And where does that leave me? Last year high school closes down. I'm then working in a restaurant. I worked in that restaurant over 3 years, I believe. And about my 20s, when I became 20, I believe, I moved back to Portland and stayed with family, and got a job working with them. And I believe that brings me up to my 20s. Let's see. Like a minute and a half to spare. Anything else to mention? Nothing really. It was hard, but like I learned basically that no matter what happened in life, I could cope with it. And I also think back like about work or my family or school, and it's like I can't really hold anybody accountable for it. Like life is what you get, and like people all are trying to do the best they can, and sometimes we all let each other down. It's just the way of things. And terrible things happen to people, or even mild things happen to people, and some people fold, they throw their cards onto the table and say, I'm done. Or some people under terrible or even mild circumstances rise above it. And I think I just learned to do the best I can with what I had. There you go. Birth to 20.